Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Okay, so now we're going to the penultimate lesson before we actually hit the text. This is a really important lesson today because we're actually going to combine everything all together. And it's a very core foundation, core principle in the Arabic language which will be applied across all the texts. And if you don't really grasp this, then this is where we're going to get a little bit unstuck with. Okay, so before we go into some of the stuff today, we're going to remind ourselves of what we did last week, which is what we did verbal conjugations, and we did the whole lot, and we were pretty shattered at the end of it. But this is something that we're going to have to, I think, at each lesson, maybe we just have to just do it in the beginning to keep revising it. And then eventually it's going to be second nature over time. Okay, so let's just practice it again before we go into the new text today. So we'll do our usual format, and we'll do it together. We'll start with the pronouns first, then go into the past tense verbs, and then the present tense verbs. Okay, and we remember that male on this side, female on that side, one finger singular, dual, and then plural. Okay. So if we all go together, so starting with the personal pronouns, so huwa, he, huma, they two, hum, they all, anta, you, antuma, you both, antum, you all, ana, I, nahnu, we. And on the left side, hiya, she, huma, they two, hunna, they all, anti, you, antuma, you both, antunna, you all, ana, I, nahnu, we. So there were our for the personal pronouns, and then we go into our past tense verbs, and we're using the verb fa'ala, which is to do. So fa'ala, he did. Fa'ala, they both did. Fa'alu, they all did. Fa'alta, you did. Fa'altuma, you both did. Fa'altum, you all did. Fa'altu, I did. Fa'alna, we all did. Then fa'alat, she did. Fa'alata, they both did. Fa'alna, fa'alna, they did. Fa'alti, you did. Fa'altuma, you both did. Fa'altunna, you all did. Fa'altu, I did. Fa'alna, we did. Okay? And so from past to present, so from fa'ala to yaf'alu, he is doing. Yaf'alani, they both are doing. Yaf'aluna, they all are doing. Taf'alu, you are doing. Taf'alani, you both are doing. Taf'aluna, you all are doing. Af'alu, I am doing. Naf'alu, we are doing. Going to the female side. So, taf'alu, she is doing. Taf'alani, they too both are doing. Okay. Yaf'alna, they are doing. Taf'alina, you are doing. Taf'alani, you both are doing. Taf'alna, you all are doing. Af'alu, I am doing. Naf'alu, we are doing. Okay? So this is something that we're just going to have to keep practicing. You're going to have to look at those tables. The key things that we remembered was that to distinguish between the past and the present is that the present has a prefix. Yeah? So it's that, whereas in the past it always starts with the verbal root, so fa'ala is always in there first. But in the present you have yaf, you have taf, you have af, and you have naf. Okay? So that's the way you can reckon, this must be some sort of present tense verb. Okay. The other thing that we reminded ourselves was the dual. The dual is common to female and male. So it makes it a little bit. So tuma is the same for male and female. Huma is the same for male and female. So they both did huma, you both did tuma. So it's exactly the same. Okay. So that was our verbal conjugations that we did last week. Okay. Now what we're going to do today, inshallah, is actually do some phrases and do sentences, okay, and wrap it all up together in terms of our 20% that has 80% application. All right. So if we go back to our Arabic map of the loves of speech, yeah, and so we're going to look at the mawdu', which is the meaningful one, rather than the muhmal, which is the meaningless. And we understood that in the mawdu' there were three types of meaningful words. One was singular words, which were the kalima. Then there was the phrase, the murakkaba ghayr mufid. And then there was the jumla, okay, which are complete sentences. We understood on the complete sentences there were two types. There was ismiya for nominative and fi'liya verbal sentence. And we'll go into what that actually looks like in detail today. Then we understood about the phrases, and a phrase is basically not a complete sentence. So, a tall man. Yeah, you need to say, what about the tall man? A tall man entered the house. Then it becomes a complete sentence. A tall man is a phrase, for example. We went into the kalima, and we understood there were three types of kalima. We understood there were isms, and we understood with isms that this is very broad. It doesn't just mean nouns. We understood that. We understood that it means personal nouns, like names is an entity of a name or a place or a thing. We understood that it could be an adjective. We understood that it could be an adverb, and a pronoun. And the pronoun was the abbreviation of a noun: he, she, it, them. Okay, so we understood kalima there from the ism, very broad. Then we also understood that there were verbs and that there were harfs as well. Okay, and we understood that harfs didn't have a meaning in themselves, whereas ism has a meaning in itself, it's an entity, and a verb has a meaning of action, but a harf has no meaning. It's a meaning in context of what it connects to. So in itself means nothing unless you say the man went in the garden. Connecting it gives it that meaning of going into the garden. Okay, and we understood with these harfs that they were amil or ghayr amil, i.e. that some of them affect the grammatical state of the noun, okay, and some don't, right? And we remind ourselves about the grammatical states. We understood there were three grammatical states. There was the rafa, which often is reflected by a dhamma. Then we understood there was also a nasab, which is often reflected as a fatha. And then there was the third state, which was jar, which is often reflected with a kasra. And this was the end of the ism, yeah? The vowel at the end. And so what we appreciated, that the vowels are expressed with the dhamma, the kasra and the fatha, so they help us to pronounce the words, but we also appreciated that they actually give us a particular meaning beyond the word itself. Yeah? And that's the richness of the language and how the grammar works in Arabic. And we understood that that is not indicative of other languages like English or Urdu. Yeah, the vowels in Arabic convey meaning as well as pronunciation and articulation. Okay, so with that in mind, let us now cover phrases. Okay, now in the Arabic language there are actually 15 different types of phrases. Okay, and today we're going to cover the most common ones. And there are two that we're going to cover, the two most common phrases that you'll encounter in the Arabic language, 2 out of the 15, okay? And the first we're going to cover is the mawsuf and sifa. Okay, mawsoof and sifa. Now, the mawsoof and sifa is really the noun and the adjective in English terms, right? The important thing that you have to understand with mawsoof and sifa is that in the Arabic language, they're both isms, aren't they? Because a noun and an adjective are both isms. So it's a connection of two isms, right? Together. Right? So that's the first thing. Two isms coming together, next to each other. All right? One would be what we would call in English the noun, and the other would be the adjective describing the noun. In English, the adjective comes first. So, tall man. Tall coming first before the man. In Arabic, it is the other way round. The noun comes first and the adjective comes second. And that is the sifa. Okay? So the sifa is the one that describes the mawsoof. Okay? The mawsoof being the noun. Okay? So you'll know whether this is the case by what the sifa actually is. So if it is tall, as in tawil, then you know by definition, yes, it's an ism, but you also know by its meaning that it must be adjective, because tall is a description of something. So you know automatically it's a sifa. Okay? Now, the important thing to know about the grammatical relationship is that the sifa follows the mawsoof in 4 ways. So that will help you to recognize that this is a mawsoof-sifa relationship happening. Okay? It follows it in gender, it follows it in plurality, it follows it in definiteness, and in grammatical state. All right? So, gender, plurality, grammatical state, and the definite article. Okay, so meaning that if gender male or female, plurality whether it's singular, dual or plural, grammatical state as we know is if it's in rafa or nasab or jar, and then whether it's a definite article, the tall man as opposed to a tall man. So if it was a tall man, it would be rajulun tawilun, a tall man. So you can say rajulun. So actually, why don't we just use this as the example and write it down?
What's the number 4?
Is definite article, which means the. So okay, so rajulun tawilun, you can see that it's got rajulun and tawilun. Okay, so this means that it's in the indefinite state.
Is it tawil is
Tall.
Tall, waw, ye, lam?
Ta with an alif, then wa, and
Is there alif as well?
so let me just share. And let's say yeah. So
No,
ta.
I thought there is no alif in between. It's just tawil, waw, ye, lam.
I'm not quite sure, but it could. But the principle being is that the ending. Okay.
I think it's 12.
Is it tawilun?
No, ta, waw combined and then ye, lam combined.
Is it? I think it's got a tawil. Okay. Oh, okay.
Then tawil is a alif, waw, tawil is some sort of
Oh, okay.
excuse. That's tawil.
Let's put that.
This tawil is tawil, waw, ye, lam.
Okay. Tawilun. Okay. So there we've got indefinite. Now, if we wanted to make it definite, okay, it'd be al-rajulu at-tawilu. At-tawilu. All right. So it has to follow it in that state. If it is the state, if it's rajulan, so it'd be rajulan tawilan. All right. So it has to follow in nasab if that's the state. If it's the state is in nasab, and also in terms of gender. So if we can say Fatima is tall, or say tall Fatima, then you would say Fatimatun tawilatun. All right, okay, and then in plurality as well. So if it's a plural, then obviously then also the adjective also needs to be in plurality as well. Okay, so it's a pretty simple phrase relationship. It's basically got to match in every respect. You could more or less say gender, plurality, state, and definite article. So this is the mawsuf and sifa. So that's one phrase that we've learnt now. Okay. Now, the second phrase that I want us to appreciate, and it's a very common one, is the mudaf mudaf ilayh. Okay? Okay, mudaf mudaf ilayh phrase. Okay, now my Arabic script writing is not going to be perfect, so if you do spot any mistakes, do let me know. So mudaf mudaf ilayh. Now what that is basically it's a possession phrase. All right. So an example would be Zayd's book, or the book of Zayd. So it's a possessive phrase, and so in the mudaf mudaf ilayh, the possessor is the second part, and the first part is the possessed. Okay, so if we want to say Zayd's book, so yeah, correct. So kitabu.
Would it be kitabun or kitabu?
Okay, we'll go into that. It's kitabu Zaydin. All right. Okay. Now, the reason that is that the mudaf, which is the thing that's being possessed, so it's the book that's being possessed. It's Zayd's book. Okay. Is that the rule is the first part. Again, these are two isms together. Same as in the mawsuf and sifa. But how can you differentiate the two isms? So this is the question, right? So the way you differentiate it is that the possessed, the first bit, the mudaf, it's not in tanween, and it's not in the definite article. So it always has a single vowel, right? Okay, so it's never in tanween, so it can never be kitabun Zaydin, cannot be in a mudaf ilayh relationship. Okay, and nor can it be al-kitabu Zaydin. It cannot be like the book of Zayd. You can't put al-kitabu Zaydin. Cannot happen in a mudaf ilayh relationship. So it's always a single vowel. However, in the possessed, on the mudaf, the grammatical state can be different. All right, so it could be kitabu, it could be kitaba, and it could be kitabi. All right, depending on what's coming before it. Right, so it can have an altered grammatical state, all right, but it's always a single vowel. This is the key thing, the singularity of the vowel, all right, because normally nouns are expressed in tanween or in definite or indefinite. Okay, these are always in single, all right. But Zaydin is now the possessor. It's the mudaf ilayh. So that doesn't have those rules. The only rule that the possessor or the mudaf ilayh has is that it needs to be in jar, in the state of jar, and the state of jar is normally expressed with a kasra. That is it. So it could be kitabu Zaydi, so az-Zaydi, you know. So, but Zaydun in itself, because it's a personal noun, it doesn't need a definite article. The name itself gives it that definiteness. Okay. Or you could say the book of the mosque, okay, or the mosque's book, yeah. So there you could say Kitabul Masjidi, yeah. Okay, so there will be the definite article. So the mudaf ilayh can have a definite article. Okay, all right, or not. It can be definite or indefinite. So tanween or al. But the key thing is it must be in jar. Okay, so this is how you're going to be able to differentiate. Some challenges you will get is that what if you have kitabi zaydin, you know? So the way you differentiate, well, how can that not be a mawsuf sifa? The reason is that one is single and one is tanween. That's how you differentiate. So kitabi zaydin still has to be mudaf ilayh and not mawsuf sifa. So even though both are in the jar state, but one has a single vowel, which is the mudaf, and the mudaf ilayh is in tanween.
We understood also that when we say kitabu,
Yeah.
kitabun,
Yeah.
that's a subject, isn't it?
Yes, but that's in a sentence. This is a phrase.
Okay.
This is a phrase.
So phrase has now
Yes.
a different principle.
Yes. So a jumla, a sentence, consists of phrases and words together. Okay, and this is and when we get to sentence, I'm going to give you a piece of information that is so unbelievably critical that we just don't realize it. It will help you to work out really long sentences, how it all comes together. So we're going to hold on to that thought because it's coming. So you're quite right. You know, in nominative sentences, it starts with a dhamma, the mubtada. Okay, but in here we're just talking about an isolated phrase. So kitab zaydin. So there might be some words before it and words after it in terms of the jumla, but this in isolation as a phrase has to be like this. Okay, it's got to be a single letter. Okay, and that single letter in the mudaf can be in any grammatical state, but it has to be a single letter, and that's what gives this away. Whereas normally all isms are either going to be expressed in tanween or they're going to be expressed with a definite article. Okay, that's the principle. And we understood that, look, even though both are in jar, as in the same rule with mawsuf and sifa, but because one has a single letter, that gives it away that it must be a mudaf ilayh relationship. Okay? Alright. So these are our two phrases. Alright, we've learnt. Okay? The mawsuf and sifa, which is basic noun, adjective. We understood that the noun comes first and the adjective second. But when we translate it into English, we then translate it as tall as opposed to man tall. And then we know the mudaf ilayh relation, which is the possession phrase. Okay? So that in mind now. So we've covered words, we've covered the two most important phrases. Now let us come to the jumla, which is really how do we make a sentence. So, the jumla. So jumla can be, as we understood, there are only two types of sentences: ismiya and fi'liya. Fi'liya. And that basically translates as a nominative sentence, ismiya, and a verbal sentence, fi'liya. So what does that actually mean in practice? What that basically means in practice is that when you read a sentence in Arabic, the word that it begins with dictates whether it's a nominative sentence or a verbal sentence. So if the word starts with an ism, it's going to be a jumlatul ismiya. If the word starts with a verb, then it is a jumlatul fi'liya. That is basically the difference between the two. Okay? What does the word begin with? Alright? So if we now start with jumlatul ismiya, and let's pick an example. So a nominative sentence could be like, in English, let's say, the book is new. Okay? So that will be in Arabic. Al-kitabu jadidun. Okay? Al-kitabu jadidun. And what you notice here is that you've got the mubtada, and the khabar. So what that basically, the mubtada is what you begin with. So it's an introduction, and it's the noun that introduces the sentence. That's what's called the mubtada. From the beginning. And that is going to be a noun. So the noun in this example is the book, Al-Kitabu. Okay? The khabar, which means that which describes or informs the word that has been introduced. So the book is new. It's basically saying the introduced word of the book, it is informed by being new. The book is new. That is it in a very simplistic sense. So the khabar informs of what the mubtada that's been introduced. All right? And there you have a very simple example. Al-kitabu jadidun. Now the key thing is in nominative sentences is that they can be multiple words and phrases. That could be the mubtada, and multiple words and phrases that could be the khabar. So we're going to go into that, and that's where the complexity arises as to which bit ends where. All right? The key to knowing this is what you have to know is where does the phrase relationship end? Because there is no is in Arabic to help you here. There is no is, because that's what we're saying. Where's the is coming from? There is no is. It is an assumed based on the grammatical workout of the word. Okay? Because the key thing in here, you got al-kitabu jadidun, so you've got two isms together. All right? But another way you could describe those two words is the new book, which would be a mawsuf sifa relationship, right? The way you would be able to distinguish between a mawsuf and sifa is because one has got a definite article and the other one doesn't. So if it was mawsuf, it would be al-kitabu jadidu, al-jadidu, right? Al-kitabu al-jadidu. Then it would be the new book, mawsuf sifa, because it has to match it in definite.
Wouldn't it be done kitabu jadidun?
Sorry?
Wouldn't it be done the no definite article before kitab?
That's for possession phrase. So that's the mudaf ilayh. Yeah. So yes, you're right. So if we can't really use this one as an example because jadid means new. But yes, but let's even grammatically, if it was a mudaf ilayh, one there would be no definite article. Second of all, this would be in jar. So that's how you can distinguish two isms, yeah? Okay. So what happens is that when you look at a complex sentence, you actually look at where the where the phrase relationship ends. Where it ends is where you put the is in. All right. Where it ends is where you put the is. All right. Is when the phrase relationship ends. All right. So we're going to go into some examples there as to how that might work. But just hold on to that point, okay? So the book is new. Yes.
Can we give an example of ending a sentence? You know how, so we know where the sentence is ending.
Relationship.
We can. We probably
or
can.
is it too much? You will cover it later.
We will cover it, but you could, you know, even let's look at if we looked at Surah Fatiha, maybe we can look at a relationship there. Let me just see. That might give us an example, because we're going to get plenty of examples of this.
I was just trying to put that is in my head how to.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. Just try and look for an example where you might want to. Okay, so I can give you an example. This one is like in Surah Fatiha. Right, let's take that one. So you got Alhamdu. That's the mubtada. Hamd is an alhamd, so it's a definite article, alhamdu. Okay, that's the mubtada because then it goes lillahi. So lillahi is not related to alhamdu. So it's not alhamdu or mawsul sifa. So then you put alhamdu, all praise is. Then it goes lillahi rabbil alameen ar-rahmanir rahim maliki yawmiddin. All that becomes the khabar. What I would suggest, appreciate it for now, but once we go through the text, it will come alive. The idea that you have to try to understand is that the phrase relationship must end before you put the is in. That is the key, and you'll be able to work that out by knowing all the phrase relationships. So if you know all 15 phrase relationships, you're going to work out where the is going, where the split between mubtada and khabar is going to be, because you understand, you know, that there's no phrase relation. When there's no phrase relation between two words, that's when the is pops in.
Is it a possibility? Maybe I'm jumping ahead, but I just want. Is it a possibility that you have mubtada?
Yeah.
Some other things, and then khabar?
Yes, it can be, but we're not going to go into that, because that's going to confuse us, yeah? The principle is, that I want you to understand, is that the mubtada can be a single word or a complex of a number of series of words. To what extent is where there's a phrase relationship, okay? So, if we take it in the English, let's do it in the English, okay? So, the book, all right, and then we've got is new, okay? But if we said the large book, right, is new. So the large is going to be a mawsuf and sifa relationship with book. You're going to see that. Yeah. So you can say you're going to see al-kitabu al-khabiru, the large book. So you can see that there's a phase relation between kitab and kabir, al-kabiru. Is both have definite article al, both are in the dhamma, so you can see there's a phrase relationship going on. So you can't say the book is large. If you want to say the book is large, then you say al-kitabu kabirun. Yeah, there won't be any definite article. So let's just do that. All right. So here, so let's just do this one first. So al-kitabu jadidun, this is the book is new, alright? Okay, if we want to say the large book, so if we have three isms here, so we have al-kitabu, then we have al-kabiru, here. So there you've got three isms here. You've got kitab, you've got kabir, and jadid. So how do we work out? Because it could be, and I'll do the third one. All right, here you go. So the first one, al-kitabu jadidun, we know, the book is new. Here we've got al-kitabu, al-kabiru, jadidun. So we know that there's a mawsul sifa relationship going on because you have al and you have al. You have a dhamma and a dhamma. And they're both male. So you know that this is a mawsul sifa coming. Whereas al-kabiru, jadidun, there is no phase relationship between that. They're not matching in any way. So that's where you put the is. Because there's no relation between al-kabiru and jadidun. It's not a mawsul sifa, it's not a mudaf ilay. Because if it was a mudaf ilay, there won't be any al. Right? And this would be in jar. So you can see there's no phase. You just know that there's no phase relation between. And for the purposes of us learning Arabic, we're just going to assume there are just two phrases in the whole of the Arabic language. Is it mawsul sifa? Is it mudaf mudaf ilayh? There is no mawsul sifa here, and there's no mudaf mudaf ilayh. There is a mawsul sifa here though, so they connect.
But doctor, there is no relationship. This is not a mubtada khabar relationship. Al-kabiru jadidun. Al-kitabu al-kabiru jadidun.
That's phrase relationship.
Okay.
A phrase relationship.
So mubtada khabar is a
Sentence. Yeah, that's not a phrase relationship. A phrase is what words come together. So the idea is that the mubtada, right, can consist of words and phrases, and the khabar can consist of words and phrases. That makes a sentence, a jumla. What we're saying in this example here is that al-kitabu al-khabiru, this is a phrase relationship, and that consists of the mubtada. So that whole thing is mubtada now, and that in itself is just khabar. You see? So now you have two words that consist of the mubtada, where there was just one, because there's a phrase relationship within the mubtada.
thank you.
Yeah? And then so how would we then distinguish between the large book? Well, again, this would be here. Al-kitabu, or the book is large. Okay? So again, Al-kitabu would be the mubtada, and khabirun would be the khabar. Reason being, there's no mawsul sifa, because al is with a definite article, and there's no definite article in khabir. That's none, so it can't be mawsul sifa. They're not matching. Can it be mudaf ilayh? Well, no, because the first the mudaf is a definite article, so that can't be mudaf ilayh. And also, this is in rafa and not in jar. So you can rule out the two. So therefore, the is must come in between. This, I promise you, if you can grasp this concept, this is where people struggle with Arabic for many, many years, because they don't understand this concept of where does the phrase relationship end for you to then put into the khabar. Because if you have these three words, if you just looked at it blindly without any grammatical, you have three words: kitab, kabir, and jadid. So is it big new, or is it big book? Or what is it we're trying to say? I know there's a book, I know there's big, and I know there's new. What is coming together here? This is where you have to know the grammatical phrase relationship. Because the fact that these two are matching is a mawsul sifa, so that must mean that the kabir is describing the book and not describing the new. And al-kabir is next to jadidun, but there's no phase relationship, there's no mawsul sifa, and there's no mudaf mudaf ilayh. So therefore, that's where the is must be, because there's no phase relationship there. You're going to see hundreds and hundreds of examples of this, okay, as we go through the text. But this is what I want you to just try and appreciate. Okay, I hope it's semi-clear. It's a difficult one to grasp, but inshallah, we're going to. And remember, this 20% it's got the most broadest application. Therefore, we're going to encounter it so many times. In every sentence, there's going to be this issue. So it's going to be grounded. It's not something that you'll come across once and never again. It'll always be repeated. These principles. Now, the verbal sentence, the fi'liya, we know starts with a verb. I will go through the normal one that we always go through, daraba. Okay, so darba Zaydun Amran. Okay, and so here, this is fi'liya, and the minimum requirement for a jumla fi'liya is that it must have a verb, which is a fi'l, and it must have a fa'il, a subject, which in this case is Zaydun. Okay, this is the minimum required, all right? Because the reason being is that in some verbs you don't need an object. For example, Zaydun sat. You don't have to say what he sat on. Zaydun sat. Or Zayd spoke. Yeah, that's a sentence. But you can't say Zaid hit. Who did he hit? Hit what? Yeah, so you say Zaidun hit somebody, or hit the object, hit amran. Okay, so but in the minimum you can have just a fi'l and a fa'il, as we say, Zaid spoke, Zaid sat. Okay, in other verbs you need a maf'ul bihi, which is the object, and the terminology for the verb is what they call transitive and intransitive. So intransitive means that you don't need an object. So sitting doesn't need an object. Hitting does need an object, so it's transitive. It needs to trans into an object. Okay? So, but the minimum is a fi'l and a fa'il, and if it's a transitive verb, it will have a maf'ul bihi. So maf'ul bihi. That is the actual object, maf'ul bihi. Okay? So fi'l, fa'il, and if it's a transitive verb, it has a maf'ul bihi, the object.
So this is the structure of sentence?
Yes, a verbal sentence. Daraba Zaydun amran. So here the fi'l comes first, normally. Then Zaydun is in rafa, meaning subject. And then whatever's in nasab is the object. That's the rules for verbal sentences. So maf'ul bihi is in nasab. The fa'il is always in rafa. And obviously the fi'l is the verb. Okay? The other important thing that you need to know in verbal sentences is that obviously it must always have a fa'il. Okay? If it always must have a fa'il. There's got to be a fa'il there. Either the fa'il is in the verb itself, or it's in the noun that follows it. So here you've got Zayd here. So the fa'il will be in this case Zayd. If Zayd wasn't there, what you would have, you can have also daraba amran, okay, which basically means he hit Amr. However, you'll see there are two words. Actually, there are three, right? Because what you'd have to do is extract out a huwa. So it's actually still, because there has to be a fa'il. So you have to extract out the huwa from daraba. So it's actually three words, 1, 2, and 3. Yeah? Because a verb must always have a subject, a fa'il. So you take out the huwa. Alright? And that will be, so it would be daraba number 1, huwa number 2, and amran number 3. The fi'l, the fa'il, and the maf'ul bihi. That's how verbal sentences are. The fa'il in rafa, the maf'ul bihi in nasab.
In this case,
yes.
It's not in rafa though. In this particular case, because it's the example is like fa'ala, yeah. So it is in a we are saying he did, but the tashkil is not indicating that it is in the rafa form, isn't it?
You mean the huwa?
Huwa.
Yeah.
Huwa is automatically covered in the rafa.
No, you have to take the huwa out.
Sure, but it's present in the daraba because of.
No, this is the thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, this is the thing. The huwa has to come out. It's almost in Arabic. It's not written out. It's assumed that you will take it out, but it has to be taken. So from a purpose of grammatical analysis, we take it. So we take it out and write huwa.
Right.
Yes, because the rule is that there must always be a fa'il. Okay, so if there's no noun like Zayd, then you have to take out a huwa.
So that's replacing it with a pronoun.
It's a pronoun, exactly. Now, the idea that Amr this is a good question, because Amr says, well, hang on a minute. If we look at daraba and even huwa, huwa's got a fatha at the end. Well, where's the rafa here? This is in the state of rafa. But remember what we said? We said that rafa in 80 to 90% is expressed with a dhamma. This is the 10%. So personal pronouns do not, they express a state, but they don't reflect it. They're of the 10%. And so the Arabic term is called mabni. Words that don't reflect in their vowels, but they're in a grammatical state. So you would say, if you were to analyze this, you would say daraba is the fi'l, and you say huwa is mabni in the state of rafa. Because it doesn't have a dhamma, because it's one of those words, and personal pronouns are an example where there is no change in its reflection. It's always huwa, whether it's an object or whatever it is, it always remains in the same state. Same tashkil. But it is still in a state of rafa, but it's mabni. So it's mabni, meaning that it does not reflect, but it's still in the state of rafa.
So is it like all the pronouns
Yes.
that we have learned?
Yes.
Whether a singular, dual,
Yes.
plural,
Yes.
they will reflect their shape or form or whatever shape or form they're in.
Yes.
They won't follow that rule of whether they should have rafa or whatever.
They are in a state they follow the grammatical states, but they don't reflect it. The reflection is with the end tashkil. Either it's a dhamma or it's a fatha or a kasra, right? Most nouns, most isms will reflect this. Some, which are don't, and personal pronouns don't reflect it. But this doesn't mean that they're not in that state. So huwa can be in rafa, it can be in nasab, and it can be in jar. However, it will always look at as huwa. It will not be huwi or huwa or huwu. It cannot be. It's mabni. Yeah? And that's just how the Arabic language, and that's the 10%. But in the vast 80-90%, if it's Zaid, there's going to be Zaidun, Zaidan, Zaidin. If it's Baytun, Baytan, Baytin, these words will always 100% reflect the state. But there are certain words like personal pronouns that do not reflect the state, but they're still in that state. This is still in Rafa. But you would describe it as a word, you'll say this is an ism, it is a mabni ism that's in the state of Rafa. So you'll say it's in the state of Rafa.
One more question.
Yes.
When you say daraba amran,
Yes.
could it not be daraba hiya amran?
Yeah, okay, let's do that then. Yes, it can be. So
how do we now, we have to know the context, and is that what it is?
No. So when you put daraba huwa,
That's what
huwa
I'm
amran,
We're driving the daraba because it's like a fa'ala.
so in this case, if it was actually written daraba huwa amran, okay, what you'll say is that you don't have to extract it out, the huwa is there. So you'll still call this the fi'l, and you'll call this the fa'il. So you won't take it out because it's already there. And why would you see that? This is balaga. Remember what we talked about in the very first lesson? Because both essentially mean the same thing. So daraba amran is the same in essential meaning as daraba huwa amran. It's a different way of expressing. This is balaga.
My question is that
Yes.
this is we are saying he
Yes.
hit amran.
Yes.
What if she hit amran?
Okay. Okay. So there, what would happen?
Then daraba will change.
Change, yeah, that's what I
So what we're going to do? Daraba. Let's just do. Forget the jewels. Daraba, darabud, darabta, darabtum, darabtu, darabna, darabat. Okay. So in darabat, what you will do in this one, if it's she hit amran, you're going to have it in this way. So you will put darabat. Okay, so that might be, as you say, common for most men in this. I'm not present company excluded. So darabat, and then you have amran. Now, but the thing is, you still have to extract out the hiya. You can't. You still have to take it out grammatically. It's still three words, even though it's not. It's expressed in it. It's a presumed. Yeah, but you can't say it's in there. You have to take it out because in a verbal sentence, a fa'il must always follow the fi'l. So there has to be something after it, right? So therefore you take out the hiya in this instance, right? But that's only for the plurals you don't, because darabu they hit, the wa is the word that makes the they, darabu.
In modern everyday language in
Yes.
Arabic, is it, I don't know what they do. Do they remove this, what do you call the file, when they speak in everyday language?
Yeah, they're going to have lots of, but their abbreviations are not going to be grammatical. Yeah, this is just the slang that they've come. So it's going to be, so that's why I would say it, in some ways, like, you know, we talked about before that, oh, you go to an Arabic country, you think, oh, you're going to learn Arabic because you can speak to the locals. You will not, you'll actually, you could also destroy your grammar and your whole concept of grammar. So it really is two separate worlds here. So what you're understanding is the classical grammatical formation of the words, okay? So there you see darabat amran, and then you have to take out the here so that we have a fa'il present. Okay? All right. So let's just a little recap, and then I'm going to finish off with the last bit for you, and then that will be the end of the lesson, inshallah. So at the moment, we've gone through the words previously, we've gone through the conjugation of verbs, and what we've tackled today is the phrases and the sentences. The phrases, murakkab ghayr mufid, we've mentioned two, which are the most commonly used, which is the mawsuf and sifa, which is noun adjective, and we've done the mudaf and mudaf ilayh, which is the possession phrase. Then we've covered the jumla, and we understand the nominative and the verbal. The nominative being ismiya, jumlata ismiya, which means that it starts with a noun, or it's a fi'liya if it starts with a verb. We understood with the ismiya that there's two parts to it. There's the mubtada, and then there's the khabar, which describes and informs the mubtada. We also understood is that the mubtada and the khabar doesn't necessarily need to be one single word. It can be a multitude of words, but in between the mubtada and khabar there is an is that we've got to put in. It's not in Arabic. We have to work out where that is. Where we work it out is we end with the phase, the relationships of the mubtada. So whether there's lots of mawsul sifas going on or mudaf mudaf ilayh, once till the phrase relationship ends, that's where the is put in, and then we know where the khabar starts. All right, because they're essentially a whole group of isms. So where does it end? And that's how we work it out, through excluding all the phrase relationships, and then we put in the is. We understood with the verbal fi'liya that it starts with the verb, but it must always have a fa'il. And if the fa'il is not present within the first conjugation, like daraba, we have to take it out and put a huwa or hiya, depending on if it's male or female, to make sure there's a fa'il in there. The maf'ul bihi, which is the object, which is in nasab, may be present or may not be, depending on the verb. If it's transitive, so hitting, you have to hit something, it is transitive, it needs an object. If it's sitting, you don't need an object to sit. Okay, so it would be intransitive. So the bare minimum is a fi'l and a fa'il. Okay, so this is our makeup of the Arabic language. Now the last thing I want to leave you with, and again, this is another critical piece of information that is going to really help us out a lot, and it's about isms. All right, the isms can be expressed in the Arabic language in 22 different ways. Isms can be expressed in the language in 22 different ways. Right? And those 22 different ways can be boiled down to 3 states: Rafa, Nasab, and Jar. So the question in our minds is, well, Rafa, Nasab, and Jar are only 3 states, but yet you can get 22 ways out of those 3 states. Guess it, how is that? This is what we'll conclude with. Alright? So those 22 ways we're going to say is in Rafa, and we're going to say in Nasab, and in Jar. Okay? And what I will tell you, these 22 ways, okay, in Jar, only 2 ways. So that's easy. We knew that already. In Rafa, 8 ways. Okay. In Nasab, 12 ways. Alright? So, by knowing these ways, we will be able to work out what context the noun, the ism, is being used in. All right? But again, I'll point to say, well, how can it be more than 3? Because there's only 3 states, so how can it be? The mistake is that you presume, that nasab must mean the object, like in a verbal sentence. Rafa must mean the subject, okay? And jar must be something that follows the preposition. No, or possession. No, they have more ways. And I'll begin to show you what those ways are. Okay? So if we take Rafa, for example, we know that Rafa can be in Mubtada, it can be in Khabar, it can be as a fa'il, in a verb. So already you've got 3 out of 8. Right? Yeah? Okay, so already 3 just in Rafa that you know already. It could be a Mubtada, it could be a Khabar, and it could be a fa'il, a subject of a... In Jar, we already know this because we know the mudaf ilay relationship, okay? And then we know that following prepositions, remember we did this before? The Jar, so fi kitabin, fi sabilillah, yeah? That if it follows, an ism always follows a preposition, and the ism following it, which is in majroor, which is in the state of jar, yeah? For any, so in, on, at, with, yeah, these are all prepositions. So Bismillahi, yes, with a kasra, is in jar, yeah. Fi sabilillah, in jar, yeah, in the way of, yeah. So we understood that. So it's in the prepositional phase and in the mudaf ilay. Okay, jar majrur and mudaf ilay is jar. Does that make sense? So there are 2 states that isms can be expressed in jar. So you've got a 50-50 chance. Any ism that's in a state of jar is either in a mudaf ilay relationship, a possession, or it's following a preposition. So it would be a majrur relationship. A jar majrur. Okay? So jar is already sorted out. Ism, so the rafa, we know we've already worked out 3 out of the 8. Okay? In nasab, we know one of them, which is the object of a verb. So in the maf'ul bihi, yeah? So that's 1 out of the 12 ways that we know. Right? Okay? Now, I'm just going to add a couple more things, which will just to add a little bit more to the understanding. So, we said like the mubtada and the khabar, the book is new, all right? If we want to say the book was new, right? We introduce the word kana, all right? These are words that can add to the nominative sentence. Alright? So, kitabun jadid. Okay. So, al-kitabu jadidun. Yeah, we said the book is new. If we can have words which have a kana before it. Alright? Kana makes it into the past. The book was new. So it's still jumlatul ismiya. But these are little sort of what you can call abrogators, or words that are introduced into the nominative sentence to add a slight different phrase to it. Alright? So the book is new. Putting the kana makes kana kitabu jadid, means the book was new. Alright? But what happens with this kana is that it affects the case endings, the grammatical state. Alright? So when kana is added, al-kitabu stays the same, but the jadidun, the khabar, goes to nasab. So it becomes jadidan because of the introduction of kana. The book was new. So كان الكتاب جديدا. So now you can see that actually there is a second way of expressing an ism in terms of nasab. The first was maf'ul bihi, the object of the verb. Now we can say it's the khabar of kana is also in a state of nasab. So you got number 2 out of the 12. But you could also say the ism of kana is also in rafa. So you add number 4 out of the 8 states. So the ism of kana is in the state of rafa, and the khabar of kana is in the state of nasab. Right? And last, and this is where we're going to finish off because I need to pray Maghrib, is another one that we can introduce you to is inna. Inna means indeed. Right? So you can say indeed the book is new. Alright? So how does that work? Well, by adding inna, what happens here, it alters, again, it's an abrogator, so it changes the grammatical state, it abrogates the original. So from al-kitabu jadidun, what happens now is that al-kitaba jadidun. So here it's swapped. So the ism of inna is now in a state of nasab, and the khabar of inna is in a state of rafa. So we've now added a number 4 for the nasab, is that the ism of inna is in the state of nasab. So now you can see there are so many different variations here.
So the kitabu becomes kitaba.
Kitaba. It becomes in the state of nasab because of the inna that's before it. It's still a nominative sentence. It's still a jumlatul ismiya, but it has a couple of extensions. And kana, inna, there's a sisters of inna. These are all of the same, but these are the 2 most commonly used that we will have. So kana meaning past, the book was new, and inna meaning indeed the book is new. Both alter the grammatical states of the mubtada and the khabar. In the kana, it alters the khabar into nasab. In the inna, it alters the ism. Yeah, the mubtada. So it's called the ism of inna goes into nasab. But we don't like to use the word mubtada and khabar for when we use inna because it's a different now phraseology. So it's better to say ism of inna and khabar of inna. So we don't mix up with mubtada and khabar. So mubtada is always in rafa, and khabar is in rafa as well. Inna abrogates it by making the mubtada, the ism of inna, into the nasab. And the kana makes the khabar, or the khabar of kana, in nasab. So you can start to see that these vowels are now, these cases can be expressed in different ways. So it's not just this possessive phase, not just in the object, but has different phrases. Okay? And I promise you the very, very, very last is Zayd hit Amr, right? Or Amr was hit. Alright? So here, what you have what we have here is the passive verb. Passive verb means is that the subject is out, is no longer in the sentence. So Amr was hit. Okay, you could say it was hit by such and such person. So here, daraba actually changes to doriba, and you have doriba amrun. It's not amran. Right? Yes. Because the subject of the passive verb is actually the one who's been hit. Because there is no... Yes. So amrun becomes rafa. And that is called naib fa'il, the deputy doer. The deputy now. So the deputy doer is, so that's another example of a rafa. So it's in the state, so amra now is in the state of rafa because it's the deputy doer of the passive verb duriba, which means is hit. So amra is hit. So amra is actually the subject of being hit, and therefore it's in rafa because it's not an active verb. If it was daraba, then it'd be amran. Duriba, amrun. That is it for today, inshallah. It is quite overwhelming, but I promise you, all of this is going to be now repeated again and again and again in the text. And that's the theory now. That's it. That's all I've got to tell you about the theory. This is your 20% theory done. You have accomplished 20% theory that has 80% application. And now, next week, we're going to follow the text, which is Qasas al-Anbiya, which is the stories of the prophets. And we're going to now see all of the theory that we've learnt in these last few lessons now start to come alive, and we're going to be able to grammatically analyze them. Okay, with that theory. And we will forget things, and then what we'll then do is that when we come across a sentence, we'll go back to the theory for it to see how it's applied in this sentence, so that we remind ourselves. Okay? Okay? Subhanaka wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.